All right, I think we're gonna get started. Let's stop sharing. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Lindsay Burfond. I'm an assistant curator at the Queen's Museum. Um, and I just want to welcome everyone to the second day of culminating presentations by artists from the 2018 to 2020 Queen's Museum Studio Program, as well as artists joining us from the Queen's Museum Partner Program, Social Practice Queens, which is an educational platform and MFA program at Queen's College. It's a very bittersweet moment as this residency cohort comes to a close, but on behalf of the whole museum team, I want to say how incredibly grateful we are for sharing your dynamic practices with us and the museum's communities. It was an honor to have you on site at the museum, sharing space and working together. While this year has been full of challenges, particularly for gathering together in the studio, I'm happy we can come together here to reflect and celebrate your work. I also want to send a special shout out to artists Janine Hahn and Dan Riley, as well as Christina Ferrigno, who couldn't make it today, but we are sending our thanks their way. The format of this event will involve short presentations by artists Woomin Kim, Iman Raad, The Room of Spirit and Time, and Brianna Harlan. And after each presentation, a Queen's Museum staff member will chime in to pose a question to each artist. And at the end of the presentations, we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So to type in a question, just feel free to click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentations. And I will read your question aloud when we get there. And lastly, I just want to note that this event will be recorded and shared on Queen's Museum's YouTube page. So without further ado, I think we're going to get started with Woomin Kim, and I'll just briefly read her bio. Woomin earned an MFA from the School of Art of the Art Institute of Chicago and her BFA from Seoul National University. In addition to Queen's Museum, she has participated in residency programs at the Oxbow School of Art and Studio at Max MoCA. She lives and works in Queens, New York, and she has exhibited her work in solo shows at the Boston Sculptures Gallery, Maud Morgan Art Center, amongst others. She's received fellowships and awards from Joan Mitchell Foundation and the Korean Cultural Center. Her work has been featured in the New York Times and Hyperallergic, amongst others. So thank you so much, Woomin. Take it away.
Thank you, Lindsay, for the instruction. I'm just gonna jump right into my presentation. So I'm gonna start with minerals in use, and this work was made in 2018, and that was about the time that I started the residency, so I thought it was good work to begin with. So minerals in use is a series of fictional minerals that I made using daily objects such as toilet paper, kitty litter, plastic nails, and soaps and stuff. And what I did in this work was I broke them apart and I soaked them, I melted them, heated them, did all these kind of things until they kind of reveal their material faces that are usually hidden behind their smooth product face. And by doing this, by making them behave more like rocks and minerals, which is their origin, I wanted to emphasize the fact that these products that surround us, even though how we interact with them is kind of limited and passive, they are very active beings, and they exist with or without us. They interact with us or between themselves beyond our recognitions all the time. This work is the same idea, but instead of making these fictional mineral sculptures, I made flattened images that looking at actual mineral samples. And I wanted to create this kind of catalog of minerals. And the images are made out of embroidery and, again, daily products like stickers or box tapes or papers and stuff. In this work, the mineral patches are digitally made and printed out as embroidery patches that I made. And they are stitched down to this canvas, mimicking the layout of like 18th, 19th century encyclopedia. And here I wanted to emphasize this kind of romanticism and this fetish towards this raw material that exists throughout this modern culture. Thinking about how materials are collected, extracted, controlled, I thought a lot about pipes. The tool literally connect us from the origin of whatever materials. And whenever I think about pipes and whenever I have a chance to look at pipes, they're very strong and sturdy, very thick and very sealed. So this kind of tool extract material and suffocate material and separating material. So I kind of wanted to make this pipe that is almost exact opposite of all that. So here I made the body of the pipes using aluminum mesh and cover the entire body with embroideries. So here I wanted to make a pipe that's inside and outside is constantly connected and kind of breathable and liberated. This pipe is same idea, but instead of covering it entirely with embroidery, I covered it with this pattern that I borrowed from organic growth, whether if it's considered healthy or pathological. So the patterns are borrowed from like fungus or lichens, skin rashes or plant disease, mushrooms. So not like normal pipes that are kind of sterile and barren. I wanted this pipe to look almost like contaminated. This work is called chochungdo, and chochungdo is one of the genre of Korean painting, which literally means plants and bogs. And I think if you are interested in material, or even if you're not interested in material, as contemporary human, I think it's impossible to not notice this new components of our planet, which is plastic. And because plastic is everywhere, it's part of our body, it's in the ocean, it's in the geology, and whether we like it or not, it's new member of this planet almost. And I thought it was a perfect example of how it is fantasy to think that human can control and direct and expect the material behavior. So I was thinking these bodies of plants and bugs that are like filled with plastic. So I created these images of plants and bugs, but if you look at it closely, it's almost entirely made out of plastics, such as plastic flowers or flattened plastic parts. And this bug is made out of organza silk fabric, and inside of it is filled with these human-made objects or little plastic beads. And this work is the most recent, and because it's kind of still ongoing work, I wouldn't talk about it too much, but it's called Shijang, and Shijang means market in Korean. And I wanted to create, so what you're seeing here is one unit, and I'm imagining to expand it into many units, mimicking the market streets in Korea. And again, I'm using this kind of daily products and material to make this kind of objects you can see in local markets in Korea. And I was thinking about this marketplace that is made of these objects that are not quite raw resource and not quite finished product. And I included this work because it's literally the last project that I made in the museum, and it's actually reenaction of the work that I made many years ago. And you can see this work this fall if you are in Toronto. So that's it for today. Thank you for participating in these events again, and looking forward to Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Woomin. So we actually have, happy to have Assistant Curator at Queen's Museum, Sophia Marisa Lucas, who's going to pose a question to Woomin. Thank you.
Hi, Woomin. I'm thinking specifically about your mineral works, but all of your works in this kind of question. I'm interested in how you take everyday items and transform them into like quasi-raw forms or new forms. And I see them functioning metaphorically that way. But I'm also interested to know whether or not you think about, there's a kind of fantastical quality to them. And I'm interested to know if you think about them in relation to the concept of animism.
I think it's really interesting. I see it more as kind of interpretation. So I really appreciate that because I think it's not unavoidable when I say like how these materials are independent and active and they exist by themselves. And I think it's really fair to connect that kind of animism, but also there is something about animism that is very human defined, I think. So, when you say animism or, this kind of living quality, I also think there is some point of view that we kind of add to that kind of, like animations, like Disney movies or something, like how things move and think like animals or humans or something that is familiar to us.
The anthropomorphization of things. Yeah.
Like human or even like, animal, but like in the logic that through us. And in this work, I kind of want to emphasize that these beings are, whether they're organic or not, or considered alive or not, there is this kind of movement and interaction and constant interaction and everything that is beyond our logic of how things are supposed to behave or move or live. Or so I think there is that, but I think yes and no. Both.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Woomin, and thank you, Sophia. Really happy to head on to our next artist, Iman Raad. Iman is a painter based in New York City. Raad has a solo exhibition that's now on view at Sergeant's Daughters, and has had previous solo exhibitions also at Sergeant's Daughters and Dastan Gallery. His work has been included in group exhibitions at the Flag Art Foundation, the Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit, the Asia Pacific Triennial Contemporary Art, and the Centro Cultural La Moneda in Chile. His work will be featured in the forthcoming exhibition Reflections, Contemporary Art of the Middle East and North Africa at the British Museum. And he received his MFA in painting and printmaking from Yale University and was a 2017 to 2018 Shandenkin Projects Paint School Fellow. He's also currently an adjunct faculty member at the Cooper Union School of Art. So thank you, Iman. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay, and hi to everyone. So, okay, I guess you see my screen. Okay, I work across a variety of media. So from like painting, embroideries, glass paintings, prints, and graphic design. And I use different materials, a wide range of materials, and I work in like a wide range of sizes, from very like small paintings to larger scale murals. And some of my paintings are very loose-handed and rough. Some of my paintings are very delicate and small. So I just, it was like hard to sum up everything in 7 minutes. So I just like gonna present a few projects and bodies of work that I made since 2018. So in 2018, actually before that, I was commissioned to make a work for the 9th Asia Pacific Triennial of Contemporary Art in Brisbane, Australia. I created 2 installations for them. One was a mural that was painted on wood panels and plywoods on on units of plywood, each 4 feet by 4 feet, that you can see here. Like on the left is an image of my studio back then, and you can see each panel, each plywood, and on the right you can see an installation shot and like humans there for scale. And this is a detail of that mural. Consists of 15 of panels. So it's about like 12 feet by 20 feet. I also had like the second installation that was next to that mural was the installation with embroidery banners that I made in collaboration with craftspeople in Iran. So on the left, you can see an image of one of the shops that created these embroideries, and on the right is an image of like during the opening of that triennial, one of the events. And so I will quickly okay, can you see my screen right now?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, and just like quickly, here is like installation in that museum that you can see, installation of mural, that I can just give you a tour, a walkthrough. So as you can see, I installed that in a in a public area, like in a hallway, not inside the galleries. It was in a like public area of museum, in a like kind of a narrow hallway. So if you want to see the murals, you have to kind of bend your neck to see like the upper side, upper part of the murals. And also like each panel have a frame as you see here. And then next to the mural, these are the embroidery installation. This is happened like on installed on 3rd floor, so people could see that from 2nd floor and 1st floor as well as 3rd floor. And this is the back side of embroideries you can see here. If you go there, then so you can see. Then here is kind of a view of the mural from the other side. So back to the presentation. Okay, this is another image of same installation. Actually, that show traveled to Chile a year after that, to Santiago, Chile, and this is an image of a different arrangement of same embroideries. And something interesting was that because it's installed in public areas, not in galleries, there were always like people who engaged that because there were like events there. And in 2018, after that project, I was lucky and privileged that I accepted into Queen's Museum Studio program. And there I had the chance to be more focused on my more like delve into myself and like thinking about more myself and have more intimate practice rather than accepting commissions. So I, during my residency at Queen's Museum, I developed 2 bodies of work. One, some large acrylic on canvas that you can see here. And on the left, you can see some glass paintings that were smaller reverse painting on glass. These are 3 examples of those acrylic paintings. These are like each about 4 feet by 8 feet. acrylic on raw canvas. And this is another one with details on the right. So I applied very thin washes of acrylic, so it has like the quality of print. And also here you can see 2 examples of glass paintings. Another glass paintings with details on left. These are reverse painting on glass and mixed media and collages, like collages with aluminum foils and marble paper. And I showed this body of work in Freeze New York viewing room last year during the pandemic. So Freeze New York canceled and it turns to an online show. So so with my gallery, we decided to, with Dastan Gallery, my gallery that wanted to present in Freeze, we decided to actually, like, rather than putting works in a confine of like a small booth, small art fair booth, design our own space for that. And then after pandemic, after lockdowns, after lockdowns, when I returned to Queens Museum, I continued his paintings, but in a new series, which and also like as well as glass paintings that you can see here, which right now I'm showing at Sergeant Stutter's galleries that opened 2 days ago and it's on view. Thank you. I guess I'm done.
Thank you so much, Iman. That was great. And I'm really happy to welcome Harit T. Cuomo, Queens Museum's communications manager, who has a question for Iman.
Hi, Iman. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. Having had the opportunity to see the work firsthand in the museum, it's even more exciting to talk about it here. One of my question is related to the glitchiness of your work, the fact of like using repetition and kind of like intrusion. It almost feels like your work operates on different layers, and something that could kind of echo your practice as a graphic designer, and kind of echoing some of the tools that you might use, like online programs and Photoshop. And I'm wondering like how you use this glitchy dimension to introduce kind of like movement and maybe volume to the flatness that kind of might be at the center of your work. And then also like what are maybe the narrative aspects to this glitchiness that you're trying to introduce into your practice?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's a interesting question that I would try to answer. So yes, flatness is, as you said, is like kind of center of my practice, the idea of flatness, which has like one side of that is inspired by Persian paintings, for example, like Persian miniature paintings that has this flatness or pre-perspective image making, and also the digital age that like we are used to this flatness of the screens and consuming digital images. So so I kind of also like my practice addresses still life painting, but my still life paintings are not through observation. It's usually through like observation of images and manuscripts and paintings. So I observe images, not the objects. So this flatness is, so my practice is how to represent images or flat images of real objects. So thinking about flatness and glitches, so glitch create that kind of resemble that idea of flatness in my painting.
Thank you.
I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Iman, and thank you, Harit. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Happy to welcome next Brianna Harlan. Brianna is a multidisciplinary artist and organizer who is currently pursuing her MFA in Art and Social Action at Queens College, CUNY. She works conceptually in multi-form, socially engaged art. Her work is driven by an obsession with interpersonal culture and how that influences quality of life, health, and habits. Brianna is a Hadley Creative and Kentucky Foundation for Women Firestarter awardee. Her most recent residencies were at Oxbow School of Art and artist residency Materia Abierta in Mexico City, as well as the Makers Circle in North Carolina. She also leads community experiences and presentations, having been a speaker for organizations like Four Freedoms, 21st Century Museum Hotels, and the Kentucky ACLU. So without further ado, welcome Brianna.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Nice to, well, I can't see you here, but it's nice to see you here. You know what I mean? Ignore me. I think I'm funny. Okay. So let's get into the work. I'm going to be focusing mostly on my studio practice. I talked a lot about my community-based practice, and if there's some time, I'll speak on that some as well. Oof, that went fast. Okay, so this first work, I'm also going to be showing work that I've made since 2021. So this one here is called Lithium Dreams. It was the first piece that I made after the new year. It focuses on the effect that the medication lithium has on dream states and rest. I find it really interesting that people talk a lot about what recreational drugs does to the mind, but when it comes to discussing what prescribed drugs do to somebody's sense of reality and existence, it's taken a lot less seriously because it's on authority of a doctor. So this is a medication that I've been on in a piece that I wanted to create to kind of share some of that shift in reality here. The materials you see here are dead sunflower stalks, kind of makeshift, bringing the idea of a bed here, prescription pill vials, and this inside here is some cotton that I dyed with elderberry dye that I made. And it's kind of ongoing. Here's another manifestation of it. So it's not completely finished. The next piece that I want to talk about is called Grounded. And it's, again, talking about kind of a relationship with prescription medications. And so there are lots of definitions of grounded, you know, one being a consequence for inappropriate behavior, like being restricted from things for inappropriate behavior. One is being a mindful and balanced person, and another is being unable to fly. And so I'm looking at all of those definitions when I create this piece. These are boots that I actually wore for probably the past 3 years of my life. And these little notes sticking out of the box, as in thinking about, yes, the individual is grounded, but where's the rest of them? Because as we all know, being grounded isn't the only goal of our human existence. So this is the last piece I've made, actually, most recent. This is a piece that I made when I had to have some time being hospitalized, actually, not for COVID, which I think people forget. There are other reasons people are going to the hospital right now. But I did rubbings during my time there because I was bored. And the rubbings became something that was, so this came before the other pieces, right? So the rubbings became something that was manifesting a space and the energy of a space without talking about the what or the why of the space. So the hospital became a shower drain or a water jug. And what I like about, we're not there yet. What I like about these is the fact that sometimes being able to slow down and look at the smaller things is a lot more interesting to me. So instead of talking about the gossip, maybe, I guess, or the diagnosis or whatever people like to talk about for hospital things, or even for like the spaces that we're currently quarantined in, right? So thinking about object relational theory, if you know what that is, which a lot of artists do. So I know there's a lot of artists in here, but thinking about like how I'm understanding my experience by the objects in the room and not necessarily by what's going on in my life. I'm starting to break that down more in these works. This is a self-portrait. It's about self-care. It's called, well, the working title is I Found God, or hold on, I came up with this. I know what it is. I Found Water, Now Where's God is the title. And that's just solely breaks down from figurative kind of abstract ones, thinking about the idea of self-care and how we're so focused on like these smaller actions that we're supposed to do, like take bubble baths or get our favorite tea, that we're not actually confronting the systemic environment that we're in that's creating these needs, these like really severe needs. And so we're managing it and we're coping with it, but we're not actually getting to the root of it. And so my confusion gets more and more apparent as I go from the more conventional figurative image to trying to understand this image in this form and this trap. This is a piece called She Ascends. It was made with Black Lives Matter and 21C and Nancy Baker Cahill as a piece to honor Brianna Taylor and her family. It's in Louisville, Kentucky, and if you can look here, you can see that like you can interact with it. It's an AR monument, so you can interact with it. It changes with the weather. There's also audio piece. There's a wonderful spoken word poet named Hannah Drake who did an audio spoken word piece. So as people pull it up on their phone and they see it in real space, in real time, they're able to have that kind of immersive experience that also interacts with all the other noises and things and people that are going by. I'm not going to get to say much about my community practice, but it combines, so my other career is as an organizer and professional consultant for like diversity, equity, inclusion work. I do that for CUNY as well, actually. And so my practice has a branch where I take that way of working and use that to actually collaborate and organize with communities to create a creative intervention. But along the way, they're getting research, they're getting understanding of their community through mapping, they're getting relationship building, and all of these different things. And then the creative intervention just becomes something that they continue to rally around, like a manifestation of discussing that work. So this is Black Love Blooms. I give free flowers and love notes to Black people. Let's just look at Black people smiling for a second. Isn't that amazing? But I think my time is up. So you should go look at more Black people smiling later.
We could look at more images as we're doing the Q&A for sure. I don't want to stop. That's wonderful. But as we're starting the Q&A, I just want to bring on Brian Balderson, who's the Queens Museum's exhibition production manager. And I think Brian has a question for Brianna.
Hey, Brianna.
You can show more images if you'd like as we're talking. I don't want to cut you off.
No,
Thank you for sharing your work with us. I did a dive on your website and looking at stuff, and I noticed that you are a fellow Hanoverian, so it's nice. I don't meet a lot of them.
wow.
Right? Nice to meet another Panther in the art world.
Right.
So I was looking through your work, and, it seems you really embrace a lot of different approaches and techniques, and you seem to really be open to a lot of different genres and materials, and everything from like the AR memorial to comic book collaborations, and it's evident across both of your silos, or like I guess that's part of my question, is how you think of the social, the community practice and the studio practice. But that approach is evident in both those bodies of work. And I guess I'm interested in how you develop these choices from the conception to the completion of the project, like everything from how do you decide what medium to use or whatever, and how does that inform also how you distinguish? You've touched on it a little bit, I guess, distinguish between your studio practice and your community practice, because there's obviously a lot of commonalities between them. But I guess that's a question and a statement. So.
Yeah, I think I heard a question in there. So the easy one, how I distinguish those ways of working with my studio practice, at the end of the day, the artistic voice and authority is mine. So I make the final decisions, even if I collaborate with other people or I get influence from other people. For the most part, I'm making the choices. It's where I let myself be a little more selfish, I guess. And with the community work, it completely depends on their willingness to participate and be into it. Like, if they don't want to participate, if they don't think it's a good idea, if they don't like it, it's just dead. And so that's why even something like the AR monument, that's why I still put that in my studio practice, because that still exists. Though I would say maybe I should switch, because if nobody uses it, then it's still dead, I guess. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you again for sharing your work. And nice to meet you.
You too.
Thank you, Brianna, and thank you, Brian. And last but definitely not least, I want to introduce the Room of Spirit and Time, which is a group initiated by Taro, Masushio, Xiaofei Mo, Ali Van, Wang Shu, and Cici Wu, as an offshoot project of practice, taking the form of collaborative works and events. The first iteration at Queen's Museum began with the readings of ancient and medieval Asian texts as possible means to reimagine and cultivate a romantic epistemology. In this room, both learning and unlearning took place, and they invite temporary amnesia, a kind of forgetting and drifting, via exercises, recitations, meditations, improvisations, and ephemeral sleepwalking. Along with these activities are non-activities, where the Room of Spirit and Time functions as a hub for leisurely gatherings for artists and thinkers, dreams and realities, set to a slow flow against the fast rhythms of New York City. So I'm just going to put their website in the chat and open up the floor for the Room of Spirit and Time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. So thanks for the introduction. So we are the Room of Spirit and Time. So for this evening, we want to share with you all a reading of a text that has been in our hearts since the very beginning when we started this project 2 years ago. The title is called An Account of My Hut, written in the 12th century by a Japanese monk named Kamo no Chanmei, translated by Donald Keene in 1955. Because of the time limit, we will only be reading excerpt of the text. Let's get started.
The flow of the river is ceaseless, and its water is never the same. The bubbles that float in the pools, now vanishing, now forming, are not of long duration. So in the world are man and his dwellings. It might be imagined that the houses, great and small, which vie roof against proud roof, in the capital remain unchanged from one generation to the next. But when we examine whether this is true, how few are the houses that were there of old.
Which will be the first to go, the master or his dwelling? One might just as well ask this of the dew on the morning glory. The dew may fall and the flower remain only to be withered by the morning sun. The flower may fade before the dew evaporates, but though it does not evaporate, it waits not the evening.
In the 40 and more years that have passed since first I became aware of the meaning of things, I have witnessed many terrible sights. It was, I believe, the 28th day of the 4th month of 1177, on a night when the wind blew fiercely without a moment of calm, that a fire broke out towards 9 o'clock in the southeast of the capital and spread northwest. It finally reached the gates and buildings of the palace, and within the space of a single night, all was reduced to ashes. The fire originated in a little hut where a sick man lodged.
The whirlwind moved off in a southwesterly direction, leaving behind many to bewail its passage. People said in wonder, "We have whirlwinds all the time, but never one like this. It is no common case. It must be a presage of terrible things to come."
Again, about 1181, there was a famine in the country which lasted 2 years. Some of the people, as a result, abandoned their lands and crossed into other provinces. Some forgot their homes and went to live in the mountains. All manner of prayers were begun, and extraordinary devotion performed, but without the slightest effect. Thus, the first year of the famine at last drew to a close. It was thought that the new year would see an improvement, but it brought instead the additional affliction of epidemic. There was other exceeding unhappy occurrences. In the case of husbands and wife who refused to separate, the one whose affections were the stronger was certain to die first. With parents and children, it inevitably happened that the parents died first. Sometimes an infant, not realizing that its mother was dead, would lie beside her, sucking at her breast. Then there was the great earthquake of 1185, of an intensity not known before. Mountains crumbled and rivers were buried. The sea tilted over and immersed the land. It is needless to speak of the damage throughout the capital. Not a single mansion, pagoda, or shrine were left whole. Those who were in their houses, fearing that they would presently be crushed to death, ran outside, only to meet the new cracking of the earth. They were knocked sore into the sky, not having wings. They could not climb into the clouds, not being dragons. All is as I've described it. The things in the world which make life difficult to endure, our own helplessness and the undependability of our dwellings.
When a man of no great standing happens to live next door to a powerful lord, however happy he may be, he cannot celebrate too loudly. However grief-stricken, he cannot raise his voice in lamentations. He is uneasy no matter what he does. In his every action, he trembles like a swallow approaching a falcon's nest. The poor man who is the neighbor of a wealthy family is always ashamed of his wretched appearance, and makes his entrances and exits in bursts of flattery.
He who complies with the ways of the world may be impoverished thereby. He who does not appears deranged. Wherever one may live, whatever work one may do, is it possible even for a moment to find a haven for the body or peace for the mind? Many things led me to live in seclusion, and finally, unable longer to remain in my ancestral home, in my 30s, I built after my own plans a little cottage. It was a bare tenth the size of the house in which I had lived, and being intended just as a place where I might stay, it had no pretensions about it. An earthen wall was, it is true, raised around it, but I lacked the means to put up an ornamental gate. I also built a rough shed of bamboo posts for my carriage.
For over 30 years, I have tormented myself by putting up with all the things of this unhappy world. During this time, each stroke of misfortune had naturally made me realize the fragility of my life. In my 50th year, then I became a priest and turned my back on the world. Not having any family, I had no ties that would make abandoning the world difficult. I had no rank or stipend. What was there for me to cling to? How many years had I vainly spent among the cloud-covered hills of O'Hara?
Now that I have reached the age of 60, and my life seems about to evaporate like the dew, I have fashioned a lodging for the last leaps of my years. It is a hut where perhaps a traveler might spend a single night. It is like the cocoon spun by an aged silkworm.
Before I was aware, I had become heavy with years, and with each remove my dwelling grew smaller. The present hut is of no ordinary appearance. It is a bare 10 feet square and less than 7 feet high. I did not choose this particular spot rather than another, and I built my house without consulting any diviners. I laid a foundation and roughly attached a roof, fastened hinges to the joints of the beams, the easier to move elsewhere should anything displace me.
On the west, I have built a shelf for holy water, and inside the hut, along the west wall, I have installed an image of Amida. The light of the setting sun shines between its eyebrows. On the door of the reliquary, I have hung pictures of Fugen and Fudo. Above the sliding door that faces north, I have built a little shelf on which I keep 3 or 4 black leather baskets that contain books of poetry and music and extracts from the sacred writings. Beside them stand a folding koto and a lute.
This is what my temporary hut is like.
I am but an indifferent performer, but I do not play to please others. Alone I play, alone I sing, and this brings joy to my heart. Sometimes I pick flowering reeds or the wild pear to fill my basket with berries and crisps. Sometimes I go to the rice fields at the foot of the mountain and weave wreaths of the fallen ears. Or when the weather is fine, I climb the peak and look out toward Kyoto, my old home. Far, far away, the view has no owner and nothing can interfere with my enjoyment. When the wild deer of the mountain approach me unafraid, I realize how far I am from the world. And when sometimes, as is the wound of old age, I waken in the middle of the night, I stir up the buried embers and make them companions in solitude.
Only in a hut built for the moment can one live without fears. It is very small, but it holds a bed where I may lie at night and a seat for me in the day. It lacks nothing as a place for me to dwell.
The asteroid stays on the deserted shores because it fears human beings. I am like them, knowing myself and the world. I have no ambitions and do not mix in the world. I seek only tranquility. I rejoice in the absence of grief.
Most people do not build houses for their own sake. Some build for their families or their relatives. Some for their friends and acquaintances. Some build for their masters or teachers, and some even to hold their possessions or beasts. I have built for myself and not for others.
If there is something which must be done, I naturally do it myself. I do sometimes weary of work, but I find it simpler to work than to employ a servant or look after him. If some errand requires walking, I do the walking myself. It is disagreeable at times, but it is preferable to worrying about horse trappings or an ox cart. I divide my body and make 2 uses of it. My hands are my servants, my feet my vehicle, and they suit me well.
My greatest joy is a quiet nap.
This lonely house is but a tiny hut, but I somehow love it.
Now the moon of my life sinks in the sky and is close to the edge of the mountain.
It is now
the end of the 3rd moon of 12/12.
I'm writing this
at the hut on Toyama.
in the spirit of being the last, and as Lindsay once mentioned, to end with a song, we would like to introduce a starlit friend of the Room of Spirit and Time, a singer, songwriter, and artist in Arkansas, Emily Wang, and her new release.
In the chaos of Harlan, do we trust to see beauty? Parts of it, I can see the wind taking everything away. We set the cycle on repeat, watching time pass as I concede. Will it come back? Do it all over again. And I don't know how it all plays out. Wise ones and sages have they turn out, and the stars in time and sacred in the land stick to their own faith, and I'm serving at the slide. All the effort that it takes to understand the human state of a life that is well worth living. And the dead body in the ground, while the newborn comes bound, and the angels play games, trading our fates. And I don't know how I should go on. Salvage for us to keep moving on. And the stars in time would say highway. Never let us to their own pace. I'm sorry. Sorry. I was supposed to. Okay, sorry. But we will post the link of the
Yeah, feel free. Feel free.
to the panel chat. I'm just a little bit worried about the time.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, you guys. Thank you so much. I actually have a question for you, and it actually worked out really well because I wanted to talk about your relationship to text, right? I think, something that you had hosted the Traveling Library of Books from the Asia Art Archive in America in your studio, which I thought was so wonderful. And, the process of reading and discussing texts really permeates your practice and collective work, your individual practices and collective work. So I wonder if you could speak to a book from this traveling library or from elsewhere that shaped your work during this residency, which might be the text you read or might be different from each of you. And also a second question that kind of relates is just thinking about if you could respond to the role of spirit and spiritual in your work. I was thinking about Xiaofei and Cici, your Lovers Revolve work, Taro's recent drawing and photography, an empty gallery and the sense of mystery, as well as Ali's work on, the sense of quiet reflection or breathing or prayers. So you can respond to any of those, but that was my reaction, and thank you for the reading and music.
Do we have anyone who wants to say first, reply first?
Yeah, maybe it means takes, if you want to talk a little bit about the text that you read too, because maybe that is one of the texts that did resonate during the residency.
I guess we can maybe talk quickly, but I don't know if there's time, about the first text that we selected for our reading session. And for the first reading session was called Body So Low. And the text that we selected was a relatively very opaque and obscure text. So I guess there was certain consciousness when we tried to select the text from China in the beginning, because I guess we were trying to set a sort of like a unique position that we are very aware of Asian texts in relation to imperialism of China, and I guess we were aware of these issues. So when we tried our first reading session, the text that we selected was relatively even unknown in the context of China, like in terms of readers or how popular the text was. So maybe it's a little bit different from this text, An Account of My Heart, which is a very popular and a textbook reading from Japan. So I guess for each of the texts we select, there is a subtle differences and also concerns around the context of the text. Like, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is we are aware of these issues relate to why we want to do readings that relate to the Asian and medieval time, and what are the possible problems behind doing that. Yeah, and I guess if you want to talk about one book from the travel libraries that we were interested in, is that there is this book called Japanese Best Poem. I think Taro was also very interested in, and that's one of the books from the travel library. If you want to talk more, you can talk a little bit as well.
I mean, it's just a compilation of, it's the death poems, and I think it sort of relates back to Body So Low in some ways, to reimagine what that means. And I think it's, yeah, it's kind of pertinent as we are becoming both familiar and unfamiliar with, the phenomenon of what it means to lead.
There's just one question from the Q&A. They say the name of the artist and the musician at the end. Also, her name is Emily Wang, and she's based in Arkansas. We are going to share the link of her song again with you. And thank you, Emily.
Yeah, I'm going to put that in the chat to all of the attendees right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, did anyone else have a response, or we can open it up?
Just sort of follow up with Cici and Taro, the interesting sort of adventure that we've had together has been the opportunity to explore the different languages that we use to communicate within ourselves as well as with each other, and to have them get sort of messy and also come clear at times, and to have these medieval texts and these ancient thoughts act as almost like loopholes, but also loopholes that are a form of glue, so that we can create our own festival of languages and stories as well, which became a part of TRSD's ongoing practice. And there was also another collaborative effort that involved a true festival of stories coming from East Asia, which can be viewed online as well.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, the Room of Spirit and Time. that was our last presentation for the evening. So with that, I just want to open it up to any questions from attendees. For any of our artists or all of our artists who are here tonight, please feel free to put your question in the Q&A box. Maybe I might ask a question to the whole group that I had to start it off. And my question, there's so many different practices in this group with distinct approaches, but I did want to ask about how, this is very broad, but language, symbolism, storytelling kind of plays a role in each of your practices, whether this is through text or a personal narrative around objects, right? And the mythologies and rituals that come into play, whether it's, Iman's paintings and the relationship to the Persian miniature, or the way Woomin is kind of reorienting how we think about objects and their material origins. I'm also thinking about Brianna's rubbings of objects to ground herself. And of course, for the Room of Spirit and Time, the relationship to ancient and medieval texts. So yeah, if anyone has a response to kind of how they think about language in their work, that would be great. And storytelling.
I guess for me personally, it just because we consciously choose text as a medium for this collaboration project. For me, I feel like it's just such a wonderful porous medium that, historically storytelling has always been collective. It's not about one author, the way that it's passed down, the story was sung, it's ceremonial, and all these things become a lot easier for us, for me at least, to open up and loosen the practice. And I think that's quite important for individual practice to stay grounded and remain open to other people and other spirit and other thoughts.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I can respond. I think storytelling is super important in my work. Like, it's essential, whether it's for personal reasons or like for the community practice, and basically taking these massive concepts and ideas that have all of these intersections within them, and different people hold them in different ways, and having to figure out how to take an object and have it be a manifestation or a symbol of everything that's being uncovered. And I think it's not harder to do with a community. I think it's just as hard to do as a person, like thinking about the worlds that exist in a person. And to speak to the other part of Brian's question earlier, I think I am playing a lot with different materials and different ideas, and then figuring out like where there's something like so intuitive and I think instinctive in play, like even as children play, or even in different species, how maybe cubs play to figure out how to survive in the world. And I think we lose our sense of play as we get older. And so for me, playing a lot with different materials and sometimes wasting materials, unfortunately, that I can't afford, to get to an answer or to get to the final thing of things coming together to tell that story, is how I approach it.
Thanks, Brianna.
I think
Yeah.
it's sorry. I think it's an interesting question for my works, because I think I try to tell stories that is kind of a story, because I don't agree with kind of existing stories, and I find it challenging. Like, how do I tell a story that I don't know what that story is going to be? So I just want to try to just focus on, okay, these are the stories that we have, and I want to just kind of turn that, like, for example, like materials, I just want to turn off their faces that are familiar, and I want to show some different faces of them. But that's kind of what I want to stop, instead of go on and tell different stories and make my own further stories, because it feels a little careful. I feel a little being careful about creating different kind of story that I inject. So I don't know, that's how I think about storytelling in my work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think my practice also closely connected to language. I mean, so I guess there are, narratives that exist in my work, but they're not like necessarily like linear, complete narratives. They're like sometimes just incomplete narratives. My larger work in more have like relationship with language like a dream. So it's like a disrupted relationship with language. It's vague, it's incomplete, and it's like a mixture of like sometimes unknown narratives that just brings a feeling rather than brings a meaning. And on my smaller work, I guess they're more like poetry or like a fraction of a poetry. So it's like more like small images rather than like a whole narrative.
Thank you, Iman. Thank you, everyone. I think that we might have come to a close for tonight. I just want to thank the Room of Spirit and Time, Woomin Kim, Brianna, Harlan, Iman, Raad, as well as Harit, Brian, and Sophia for joining us tonight. I just want to say thank you for being a part of the Queens Museum Studio program, and we hope that folks will continue to follow the Queens Museum residency programs. We're in the process of finalizing the recipients of our Year of Uncertainty, Artists in Residence Open Call, and you can learn more about the programs on our website. So thank you all and have a great evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Lucy.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.